It's fair to say DLC has become a divisive topic with some gamers over the years, with some bemoaning the idea of having to pay to access parts of a game a player has already bought. However, there's also been a bunch of examples of companies fashioning together hugely entertaining and worthwhile packages that have made even critically acclaimed titles even better. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 best DLC packs of the last 15 years. Number 10. The Lair of the Shadow Broker, Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is already a universally acclaimed title when it was released in 2010, with the bulk of the game's praises being directed at its emotional depth, storytelling, and complex characters layered throughout. These elements were amped up even further in the Lair of the Shadow Broker DLC, released originally in September of 2010. Taking place after the events of the Mass Effect Redemption comic book, the DLC follows the storyline of Shepard and Liara T'Soni attempting to find a fabled information dealer known as the Shadow Broker. Lair of the Shadow Broker is split into two parts, both of which conclude with a pulsating boss fight. The first part takes place on the bustling planet of Ilium. However, it's the second part on board the Shadow Broker's ship that the DLC really comes alive. The graphics of the ship's interior are some of the best the Mass Effect series has ever produced. The inside is explorable and offers a superb battle experience, both of which combine to create easily the best expansion the game received. The chemistry between Shepard and Liara T'Soni is also a definite high. The decisions players make in the base game have an impact on their dynamic in Lair of the Shadow Broker, helping to make the DLC feel like a natural continuation to the main storyline. Number 9. Far Cry 6, The Vanishing. Far Cry 6 was already a colourful title in its own right. However, March 2022 brought with it an expansion that somehow found a way of pushing things even further. Released ahead of the record-breaking 4th season of Netflix's Stranger Things, The Vanishing begins when players are told to investigate the disappearance of Yarans from around an old Russian bunker. Investigating the bunker, players will eventually come across Ubisoft's stunning crossover with the world of Stranger Things, with the DLC bringing with it an alternative Yara in the Shadow Realm, designed in the style of the Upside Down from the show. The themes and style of the crossover were much darker than what fans of the show had grown used to, setting things up nicely for the heavy-hitting 4th season, and it works extremely well in giving Far Cry its first take on more survival horror elements. The whole storyline only takes a couple of hours to complete, but the attention to detail in recreating a part of Yara in an incredibly different art style makes this an absolute must-play for fans of Netflix's second most watched show. And they say Infinity War is the entertainment world's most ambitious crossover. Number 8. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, Borderlands 2. 2K's Borderlands 2 made a real splash when it dropped initially in 2012, with a huge portion of its praise being directed towards its huge array of wild and wacky characters. One of the best characters introduced in the game was Tiny Tina, a 13-year-old girl shown to have a seriously explosive personality. Borderlands 2 would get 4 major add-ons in its first year on the shelves. However, it was the one in which Tina would find herself playing the role of narrator that would prove to be the biggest hit. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep was released on June 25th in 2013 and introduced the fantastical tabletop game Bunkers and Badasses to the series. In the expansion, Tiny Tina acts as the game master and, in true Tiny Tina fashion, is quick to keep the action on its toes by shaking things up as she attempts to move on from the death of Roland. Not only has this gone down as Borderlands 2's best received add-on, it's also gone on to be the base inspiration for 2022's Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Number 7. The Old Hunters, Bloodborne. Bloodborne was released by Sony back in 2015 and instantly showed itself off as a genuine step up in terror from Software's previous work with the Dark Souls series. Things were ramped up to another gear with the release of the game's first expansion pack, The Old Hunters, roughly 8 months later in November. With the discovery of an Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter item, players are introduced to the Hunter's Nightmare, a unique new location filled with crazed hunters and beasts. Players must defeat these hunters to solve the mystery of the nightmare and free themselves from the curse. On top of the new location, the Old Hunters adds a whole host of terrifying new bosses, items, and lore that help make it one of the most standout additions to the Sony library over the past decade. The weapons and armor introduced as rewards to scoop up are some of the best in the game, though the jump up in difficulty makes it a noticeably more hair-raising experience than what some players might have gotten used to with the base game. The perfect recipe for a memorably terrifying add-on. Number 6. The Shivering Isles, Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. 2005's Elder Scrolls Oblivion certainly pulls no punches when it comes to its creativity. Compared to the likes of Skyrim and Online, Oblivion has garnered a legendary reputation for its vibrant quests, quirky NPCs, and generally not taking itself too seriously. And by 2007, it looked as though Bethesda was starting to embrace this to the max, with the release of the Shivering Isles DLC in March of that year. Transporting players to the Shivering Isles, the home of Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness, the DLC revolves around attempting to save this new realm from an impending disaster known as the Grey March. The Shivering Isles is easily one of the most iconic and ambitious worlds Bethesda have ever created, with the new realm being split in two, between Sheogorath's mania with wild flora and striking visuals, and Jiggalag's boggy and dark dementia. Along with its crazy characters, outlandish quests, gripping storyline, and serious impact on the series' lore going forward, the Shivering Isles is easily one of the standout moments in the Elder Scrolls franchise. Number 5. The Lonesome Road, Fallout New Vegas. Bethesda brought 6 downloadable packages to Fallout New Vegas after its release in 2010. The DLCs raised the level cap in the game from 30 to 50. However, it was the Lonesome Road storyline that really added a bit more depth to the game's lore and environment. The DLC brings an emotional end to the Courier 6 storyline that's been one of the biggest mysteries since the beginning of the base game, with Ulysses asking players to travel down the Lonesome Road that runs through a new environment ravaged by storms and earthquakes and face him for a final duel. Ulysses is one of New Vegas's most interesting characters, and his superb dialogue, provided by Roger Cross, is undoubtedly the highlight of the expansion. The Lonesome Road DLC is definitely all about the journey and story that unfolds, rounding out the Courier's story and providing a new perspective on the Legion. However, it also comes with some decent items and weaponry for players to pick up. After twice being delayed, The Lonesome Road was released in September of 2011 and provided players with roughly 4 to 5 hours worth of new gameplay and multiple endings to get stuck in with, making it still one of the best conclusions in the Fallout series. Number 4. The Ballad of Gay Tony, GTA 4. Compared to the quirky experiences in Vice City and San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto 4 was a far grittier game than what most Rockstar fans were used to when it dropped back in 2008. This has certainly made it a bit more of a divisive entry to the series, but what is undeniable is that the game received one of the best DLC packages of all time in the Ballad of Gay Tony. Released in October of 2009 as the second expansion pack for the game following The Lost and Damned, The Ballad of Gay Tony follows Luis Fernando Lopez and Anthony Gay Tony Prince, 2 Liberty City socialites. Not only does the story have some nice tie-ins with the Diamond Sale storyline introduced in the base game, but also has some whopping missions based around the pair's mob, drugs, and debt issues. Undoubtedly where most of GTA 4's color comes from, the DLC brought with it an array of charismatic characters, and a set of storylines that neatly tied up the events from the base game and previous add-on. There's over 20 hours worth of content added with the DLC, providing the game with some of the coolest characters, a welcome new style, plenty of breathless bits of action, and an arsenal's worth of new weaponry to enjoy. Number 3. Minerva's Den, BioShock 2. BioShock 2 might not hit the heights of its predecessor, but Minerva's Den certainly dragged it much closer to the original entry than it had been prior to its launch. Released in August 2010, 6 months or so after the base game's release, Minerva's Den is a story all about free will and choice. It sees players take control of Subject Sigma, a big daddy tasked with traveling through Minerva's Den, located in the city of Rapture, and downloading a schematic of the city's supercomputer. The DLC features similar gameplay mechanics to the base game, but does throw in new enemies, weaponry, and an entirely new part of Rapture for players to explore. Developed by a small team led by Steve Gaynor, who would go on to make Gone Home after being inspired during the process of creating this DLC, what makes Minerva's Den such a must-have addition to the base game is how its themes and narratives hit exactly what BioShock has always been about. Dystopian futures, twisted technologies, and question marks over control and personal choice. It hits a more melancholy tone than what players might have been used to before, making it feel like the perfect addition to sit alongside the base game. Number 2. The Ringed City, Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 players were treated to not one but 2 brilliant expansions during its time on the shelves. Ashes of Ariandel was a stellar update with a new area and 2 new boss battles. However, it was with the release of the Ringed City that the game clawed its way to legendary status. Originally released in March of 2017, the DLC was designed to be a follow-up to the events of Ashes of Ariandel, and a fitting finale for the series in general. The pack introduced 2 new locations in the Ringed City and the Dreg Heap, both of which stand out as 2 of the most expansive places that players can explore in the entire Souls universe. There's so much post-story content added to the Dark Souls universe with the Ringed City add-on, and the boss battles remain some of the most challenging and adrenaline-pumping experiences that players can have in the entire game. Dark Eater Midir and the Corrupted Slave Knight Gale are undoubtedly the 2 highlights, helping to make the DLC feel like a real investment after you perked up a character in the base game. In all, From Software gave players roughly 10 more extra hours of content to sink their teeth into with the Ringed City, and it remains one of the best value DLC packs released over the past few years. Number 1. Blood and Wine, The Witcher 3. The Witcher has garnered a reputation for being a series that loves a good DLC package. However, with the 3rd entry in the series, CD Projekt RED took things to a new level of acclaim. Hearts of Stone was the first expansion released for the game, with Blood and Wine coming out on May 31st of 2016, roughly a year after Wild Hunt's base launch. The Blood and Wine expansion sees players travel to Toussaint, a vibrant new region untouched by the chaos in the base game, tasked with finding a monster that's been killing its citizens. A whole new land, more characters, more monsters, and a thrilling storyline, Blood and Wine brings with it roughly 30 hours of more content for players to sink their teeth into. In fact, it was the huge overall scale and detail behind the expansion that's seen it just edge out ahead of Hearts of Stone as the better of the 2 acclaimed DLC packs. There's also a whole slew of possible outcomes that can come out of the story, making this feel like a fitting finale for Geralt that players have to experience before putting the game down for good. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other great DLC packs from the last 15 years. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.